and the January 6th insurrectionists have in common? They both want to attack the very fabric of democracy. Stay tuned, and we'll get right into today's topics.
That Corbin and Corbin legal team fighting for the rights of the people. That father-daughter team investing in the youth when the system ain't treating them equal. Providing truth for our people, we able to reach them. So anytime you get accused for a crime and Lord knows you ain't do it, we here to get you through it. Exemplifying prudence and glorifying God, making sure you're compensated for other people's doings. Our vision is to be one of the best. We're small enough to focus on your matter throughout the neighborhoods of Dallas. Working constantly and making sure your rights are protected. A firm team of lawyers, aggressive, effective. The team that has your back in the courtroom. Two well-spoken black lawyers in the courtroom. Investing time and resources when it's evident that you were treated wrong. Now you walking out of Dallas courtroom with a settlement. Corbin and Corbin, the father-daughter legal tag team that has your back in the courtroom. Our purpose is simple. To obtain the favorable outcome for each client and glorify Christ in all we do. Our vision is to be one of the best and most...
Hello, Rebels. Welcome to the Defiant Lawyer YouTube show. My name is attorney Chloe Corbett, aka the Duchess of Justice, and with me I have
Attorney Augustus Corbett, aka the Minister of Justice.
We are the Defiant Lawyers. We provide legal analysis of trending politics, policies, personalities, and pop culture to empower you to defy this unjust legal system. Thank you for joining us today. Why don't you go ahead and hit that like button before we get started and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We've built up such an amazing group of legal rebels who are constantly interacting with us, watching our videos, and we love the community that we have. We have so many trending legal topics to go over this week, and I cannot wait to get into it. Dad, how are you doing today? Happy Saturday.
Happy Saturday to you also, my firstborn, our firstborn daughter. I've been seeing this thing on Facebook about posting a picture about the child that made you a parent. And although I haven't done it because I don't like to get all personal on YouTube, on Facebook, pardon me. But you are that child. And so I'm doing wonderful. Anytime you, your brother, and your mom are fine, I am fine.
Me as well. And it's so good to be up here today. We couldn't do a show last week. I was in the beautiful state of Utah on a much needed break. It was amazing. Utah is just gorgeous. I was in Salt Lake City. I was able to go to the Great Salt Lake and just really clear my mind and be amongst God's nature. So that was so needed. But I'm so glad to be back today, to be back with you, Dad, on this show and talking about the things that are affecting our country and the world because there's so much going on. And at the very top of the list right now is the Russian invasion of Ukraine and all that has happened over the past 8 or 9 days or so. I have just been absolutely fascinated and tuned into the news and to social media and to watching Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and the way that he has addressed his nation and seeing the entire world almost come against Putin in his invasion of Ukraine. I have not been able to take my eyes away from it. And it has been absolutely fascinating to watch the Ukrainian people come up together and rise together and be inspired by their president to fight Putin in his attempt to bring the Soviet Union back and to take Ukraine back into Russian hands. What are your initial thoughts on just this Ukrainian conflict, Dad?
Well, I thought that my thinking has been how evil and barbaric Putin is and what he's doing to those people, devastating their country and just basically exerting his will for one primary reason. Of course, we know he wants to restore the old Soviet Union, but he knows he can do so because he controls his country, controls half of all the nukes in the world. and he knows that is his trump card, pun intended. Okay,
Literally.
literally. So to watch him do that to these people and to this country, and um, threaten to use nukes, and just destroying people and displacing a what 1.2 million folks at this point. It's awful, and most of the folks who are experts in this field, I'm certainly not, but most of the people who are experts in this field believe that he will continue his thrust to restore the old Soviet Union. So today, Ukraine, he did Crimea a few years ago. He controls Belarus. Is Poland next? Is Lithuania next? I mean, he's just going to keep going until he's checked.
I agree. And what I want to do is kind of go through the timeline of Russia's invasion into Ukraine. There has been so much that has happened in the last week and a half in terms of this invasion. It's almost been impossible to keep up because there's constant news stories that are coming out about this invasion. But I want to go through a timeline of, about what happened. And I'm getting this timeline from an Al Jazeera article. um, we have tried to get the best and most reliable news articles about this conflict. There's a lot of news stations and social media posts about it, but we're trying to get as accurate information as possible. So on February 23rd, the Ukraine declared a nationwide state of emergency, and the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres told the General Assembly that the world is, quote, facing a moment of peril over the Ukraine Russia crisis. And it was the very next day, on February 24th, when Russia launched a full scale assault on Ukraine. At that point, Ukrainian President Zelensky ordered a general mobilization, calling on all Ukrainians who are ready to defend their country to come forward. And President Biden called Russia's invasion a, quote, premeditated attack. So that was the start of this invasion. February 24th, Russia launched that full scale invasion. Um, Ukrainian President Zelensky called on all Ukrainians, not just people in the military, not just trained police officers, but all Ukrainian citizens to defend their country, because Ukraine doesn't have a large military like the United States or like Russia or like China. And Ukraine relies a lot on aid from the United States and from other European countries out of NATO. And so, in addition to mobilizing Ukrainians, President Zelensky also put out a call to help to the United States and other NATO members, even though Ukraine is not a NATO member. And the NATO and the United States have responded in kind over the next few days after the invasion. So on February 25th, the second day of the invasion, Russia presses forward to the Ukrainian capital, Kiev, as the United Nations said that more than 50,000 people had fled the country since the start of the invasion. So in one day, 50,000 people fled from Ukraine after Russia's invasion.
Wow.
And then the European Union, they agreed to place Putin and Lavrov on a list of sanctioned individuals. So Putin then became sanctioned by the European Union. On day two of the invasion, February 26th, the mayor of Kyiv imposes a curfew in the Ukrainian capital as Russian troops continue to advance towards the city. And at that point, just on day two of the invasion, Poland announced that over 100,000 Ukrainians had crossed from Ukraine into Poland just in 2 days. So the Russians kept attacking, and hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians began to flee and be displaced. But then millions more stayed and defended their country. And I think just seeing the images that on social media of regular Ukrainian citizens making Molotov cocktails, arming themselves with firearms and ammunition, learning military tactics really invigorated the world and invigorated people in the United States as well. I know that I was invigorated seeing these everyday people arm themselves to defend their country. And what was the effect of that, seeing these regular citizens stand up to a superpower like the Russian military? How did you feel about that?
I was, Chloe, I was just inspired, quite
Yeah.
frankly. I just felt a groundswell of inspiration. And it actually reminded me of our struggle here in America, our struggle as African Americans for social justice, for racial justice here in this country. The Ukrainian people are facing a giant. It's a true David and Goliath story. And that's exactly what we've faced here for 400 years. We've been the David in this story, and the oppressor, the racist, etc., has been Goliath. But we have used our slingshot and have, stood up and fought and rebelled with bravery and courage. Many of our ancestors to the point of losing their lives. So I felt that I identified with what the Ukrainian people were experiencing. Now, I don't want to jump ahead of you. And by the way, while you were talking, I was sitting there and admiring your beauty. I'm sorry for going off topic here a little bit. I'm sitting here saying, wow, look at my beautiful daughter. And unbeknownst to me, you changed your hair color to the very color of our new background. I mean,
Yep.
it matches beautifully, right? I mean, wow. So I had no idea that you were gonna do that. It's not like you call us, your parents, and say, "Hey, what y'all think about me?" that been over now for many, many years. But
Thank you, Daddy.
yes,
And the thing is, I dyed my hair a bright red, but I've been a redhead for 6, 7 years now, and I just do various different variations of red. So it just so happened that the variation of red that I did recently, like you said, matches perfectly with the background, and just
yeah. I
it
mean,
makes everything so seamless.
wow. But yeah, I mean, your beauty, your effervescence, and your smile. I mean, your beautiful smile just comes through the camera. Um,
I
so
appreciate that, Dad. Got it from
yes.
you and Mom.
Well, you got it
Got
from
to
your
thank my
mom.
genetics.
Your mom. Your
Mom, yes,
mom. You
Mom has a
definitely your
gorgeous
mom.
smile.
Yeah. Um, and also, my mind is kind of rambling. I'm gonna come back to Ukraine just a second. Also, shout out to Vonda Bailey Shaw, right?
Yes.
She won big in this primary race for judge here in the county of Dallas. And yes, it
So happy for her.
I'm very happy for her because Chloe, I remember when she was a probation officer. Okay. I remember she was working on some of my probation cases in the CDC 3, Criminal District
Wow.
Court number 3, where Judge Gracie Lewis was judge. And I remember even talking to her. She was thinking about going to law school. And of course, it's not like she was in college and getting ready to go to law school. She had lived a little life, just a little bit of life. And I was standing on one side of the counter. She was on the other side of the counter. And I said, hey, you know what? You're talking to the right person about it, because I went to law school when I was 39 years old with 2 children, married, 2 children. So do it.
Yes.
I told her to go for it. And she certainly did. And here, 6-7 years later, she's now elected judge in the county. So I just wanted to say that. Just a beautiful story. Beautiful story. Her and her awesome husband. And 2 children, I believe. So she'll be taking the bench, I think, probably sometime in January. All right, back to
Yep.
Ukraine. So yes,
Back to Ukraine.
yes, the struggle for those folks' freedom has been certainly inspirational. I must say, though, I must say, there is a dark spot in the whole thing. And that is early on, I started watching some of the black and brown folks in Ukraine who were complaining that they were not being treated fairly. They were trying to leave the country because of all the bombs that were dropping, and rightfully so. I mean, they, they're not Ukrainians. Most of them, they are students for the most part. And so they didn't come there to sacrifice their life and go to war. They came to get an education. So they were trying to leave. But I understand and in fact, it's being confirmed. I've heard several firsthand stories. I listened to a young student today, young African student today, who said that they were trying to get in line, get on the buses and trains to get out of Ukraine. And there was a separate line for white Ukrainians, and the women and children, they were told, were going to get priority, but they said black women were not getting priority, number one. And number two, white Ukrainian males were still getting on the planes the buses and the trains to get out of Ukraine. So they were having to wait for days, sleeping in the cold, sleeping in the subway, sleeping in the train station. That was disappointing. I've been very inspired by the president over there, by the people fighting for their country, resisting um, injustice. And then to hear that they were doling out injustice to black and brown people was definitely, that took away from all that I was feeling.
Yeah, me too. And it wasn't surprising either because all around the world, black and brown people, we typically get the short end of the stick. When something goes wrong, it always occurs to us much worse. So when I was hearing, like you, Dad, the reports of these black and brown refugees and students being denied passage into Poland, into Romania and other countries that border Ukraine, with Ukrainian officials and border patrol, allowing the white Ukrainians to go through, but not the Africans and the brown students. It didn't surprise me, but I'm
Me neither.
glad that it has been getting attention, and I'm glad for social media and for technology because now everyone can see it. And I think a Ukrainian official even came out and they said that they're going to try to rectify the situation and change it
Oh, I hadn't heard
because
that.
I mean, how does it? Yeah, it doesn't look right. Ukrainian is fighting back against this big superpower Russia, and standing up. The little people are standing up to this big giant. Yet you're being prejudiced and discriminatory towards black and brown students in your country. I mean, that's just not a good look. So I am glad that it's getting the attention that it deserves, and that those stories are coming out, and hopefully the situation will be rectified because
Well,
a lot of black people, just like you said, felt inspired by the Ukrainians, and then to hear that black people in the country are getting discriminated against, I mean, there's it's disappointing but not surprising.
yes. And Joe Biden has used taxpayer dollars to assist the Ukrainians.
Exactly.
Obviously, blacks pay taxes, and so our funds are being used to help the Ukrainian people, and then they're going to mistreat blacks like that. Yeah, it was disheartening.
It was. And you mentioned Joe Biden, that he just gave his first State of the Union just a
Yes.
couple days ago,
Yep.
and the Ukrainian conflict was a large part of the beginning of his speech. And I wanted to briefly talk about the State of the Union to give our grades and our thoughts about it. And I'll go first, and then I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Okay.
So I thought that the beginning of the speech, where he addressed the Ukrainian conflict and he gave, historical context to Putin's wanting to invade Ukraine,
Mm-hmm.
and how it goes back to, World War II and the NATO alliance and all of that. I thought it was good. I think that Biden is at his best on foreign policy and speaking about foreign policy because of his years of experience in the Senate and as vice president, where he was, at the President Obama's behest, he would go speak with all of these heads of state. So I thought that him speaking about that was good, and speaking about how he was going to assemble a team with his Department of Justice to go after the Russian oligarchs and their yachts and their money and all of that. I think that was great. I think the extra sanctions that he talked about at the beginning of the State of the Union was really good, and it seemed to unite a lot of the Democrats and Republicans in that chamber who were listening to the speech. So that was good. But then we get into the domestic stuff, and I think that that's where it began to kind of crumble a little. It because domestically he has not done as good a job as I feel like he has during this Ukrainian conflict. Specifically, one, I think it was a mistake to not mention the January 6th insurrection that occurred when he first became president. At the top of the show, I liken what Putin did to Ukraine to what the January 6th insurrectionists did in our capital here as an attack on democracy. So the fact that he didn't kind of link those together or even bring up the January 6th insurrectionists, I did that didn't make any sense to me. I Him not mentioning student loan debt at all. He made a campaign promise that he would at least erase $10,000 in student loan debt. He could have mentioned it like, "Hey, we're working on it," or "It's not feasible right now," or "It's something that we're going to focus on later." He didn't mention student loan debt. I think that that was a mistake, especially with young people. And then this big one that we wanted to talk about, because it greatly affects the Black community, is his fund the police statement. Funding the police, fund the police. So I kind of have probably a different take than a lot of Black folk. I feel that we do need to fund law enforcement in terms of law enforcement getting better training, paying officers more so that we get higher quality, better candidates who will apply to be police officers. Um, I think we need better quality police academies and hire on experts who know how to de-escalate situations, who can teach these officers how to interact with various communities. And I think a lot of the money needs to be diverted from just law enforcement purposes, but then diverted to mental health, social services, social workers, doctors, so that it's not only police officers who are going out to these calls that involve, a mental health situation or a situation that does not necessarily have to be criminalized. So I feel like his intent in saying fund the police was wrong. I think it was wrong in a sense he was just trying to be political and try to get some of the middle America on his side. But I feel like if he spoke about specific policies and what we can do with the money to help get better quality law enforcement in our community, that would be good. Now I know you have a different take than me, so I'm curious to hear what your thoughts were on his whole speech, State of the Union speech, and then funding the police in general.
Well, the way you just just laid it out was very nuanced, and I don't think that I have much of a disagreement with it. He just so adamantly says no to defunding the police. And I think a lot of the controversy about defunding the police has to do with how you defund, the word defund. I mean, what are you saying? And you just explained the nuances. You think that you disagree with the notion that the police departments around the country should lose funding, all their money. You're saying that a portion of their money should be used to help the community, you know, because a lot of the issues the police deal with are community-based issues, right? Poverty and family issues and mental health and drugs and the police are not equipped to deal with that stuff. They come to the scene with what? They come to the scene with a gun and a badge, right? And a taser and a nightstick. I mean, those are not the things that are needed to deal with a whole lot of the crisis that occurs in the especially in the African American community. There are a host of other issues, and so we're on the same page, Chloe, where we say, let's take some of that money and use some of that money to help strengthen the community. So if that's what somebody means when they talk about to fund the police, I'm for that. Taking some of the funds from the police and using it to get at some of the root causes that, if are addressed properly, then we won't need the police as much. Moreover, the cops have a military attitude. You know, it's like they're in Iraq or Afghanistan or the Ukraine. And certainly being a cop is dangerous. You know, we've witnessed here in the past few months many police officers getting shot. May all of them rest in peace, and may their families try and find some peace. No one is for that. That is heinous. That's evil. That's not what anyone who wants to see funds better used is not for killing innocent police officers. Not at all. So it's a dangerous job. But again, how do you go to some of that dangerousness? You go to it by trying to help some of these folks who are dealing with all these kinds of issues. And sometimes, again, it's not, just coming in blazing with shotguns and pistols and tanks and all of that. Many of these people have serious issues. And if the city, would use some of that money to also address some of those issues, again, I think a lot of folks would have less interaction with the police. Okay? Yeah. I think about a young man that you and I represented. I think about, in fact, I don't have to go that far back. Think about a juvenile that you represented last week. You disposed of his case, right? And you had to not only represent this kid in court, but you also had to try and teach this kid some manners. You had to help him with his social skills. You had to encourage him about his education. I mean, you had to do all of that in an effort to try and save this kid. Now, let's look at that. For all of that work, you did that for a court-appointed fee, which, $300-400 for the whole case, right? Am I right? Am I close to being right?
That's right.
When I was doing court-appointed juvenile cases, 12, 13 years ago, it was $300, and
I think it may be 400 now.
400 now, 300 then. Yeah. And you spending all your time trying to help these kids, okay?
Hours upon hours.
Hours upon hours fighting. Now, some lawyers don't. Some lawyers just get the cases done, get it over with, and be done with it. But that is not the Corbetts. We care about these kids. Sometimes we care probably too much. And not only do you not get paid adequately from the city or the county, but sometimes you have to deal with people's attitudes who work in the court system.
Yep.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're getting, it's like they don't even appreciate the work you're doing trying to help these kids, talking to you any kind of way, dealing with you any kind of way. And here you're pouring your life out trying to help these kids, and you're actually not making money. You're losing money. Because you could be giving your time to cases that are paying 20, 30 times more.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So If some of the money that is being used to fund the police can go to help those kinds of issues and those kinds of kids, I'm for that. Now, whether you call that defund the police or not, I don't know. You call it whatever you want to call it. The point is that in many of these neighborhoods where police officers spend most of their time, the issue is not just policing. The issue is social, it is family, it is economical, it is mental, it's a host of issues. Let's start focusing more on those things instead of spending millions and millions and millions and millions on another 1,000 cops in the ghetto. Let's take some of those millions and give these folks some real help. That's
Yeah.
what I mean by defund the police.
And see, we want to have this. We're having this in-depth, nuanced conversation, Dad. But the politicians don't care, including President Biden, unfortunately. Um, and I say that because I feel like him saying "fund the police" in his State of the Union speech was more to appease the Republicans in Congress and Middle America than actually laying out detailed policies on how law enforcement can be better equipped to have better relationships with those in the black and brown communities. So for him, in my opinion, it was a slogan to put in his State of the Union speech versus helping to encourage lawmakers to pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, and which would greatly, in our opinion, help with the this disparity between law enforcement and the black community. That wasn't mentioned at all in the State of the Union speech that I heard. Concrete solutions that can be passed in Congress or with his executive power were not mentioned. He just said we need to fund the police, which was disappointing. Um, and so overall, I would give his State of the Union speech B minus, C plus. I think he did pretty well with Ukraine and foreign policy. I think there were some things that were lacking on the domestic side. Do you have a grade for his State of the Union speech before we move to the next topic, Dad?
Well, the first part of it I liked a lot, actually, as he dealt with the Ukraine situation. But the domestic policy issues that he dealt with, I agree. It, I, when I grade him on those things, I think about what the alternative could be, and the alternative could be more years of Trump type politicians. And my Lord, the thought of that. Okay.
Yeah.
So yes, I think that the first part was good. The domestic policy stuff that he was talking about could have been a lot better. Um, I think he should have said more about voting rights. I think he should have said more about police reform. Um, I think he should have said more about issues that directly affect his most loyal constituency, which are African American people. Okay. And I'm trying to get these comments fixed so we can see some of them because Jerry Harper said here just that. She said, our culture voted for Joe in big numbers. He spoke nothing about the blacks. And that's exactly what
Yep.
I'm saying. Um,
Yep.
so I would have definitely wanted him to say more about those issues that affect black and brown people, but he didn't. So what was your grade?
B minus C
That's fine
slash
with me.
C.
Yes, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
I will say though that according to new polls that have come out, he has seen an approval rating jump of 8 points since he gave his State of the Union. So his overall approval rating jumped up to 47%, which is around what it was before the Afghanistan withdrawal. Um, he was graded his Ukraine handling is up to 18 points to 52%, And his coronavirus pandemic handling is now 55%, up 8 points as well. So he has received a pretty big boost from the State of the Union. I'm sure that the Ukrainian conflict and how he addressed that helped. And it was a more conciliatory speech to try to reach the middle America, see what things that this country has in common. So I'm sure that that's why he's seeing this bump since he gave the State of the Union.
Yeah, I agree. I think the way he's handled the situation with Ukraine has really helped him out a lot. He's done very well on that.
He has. So let's move into the next topic. A man who really needs no introduction, who I greatly dislike as a public figure and being in the public eye. And that is Fox News host Tucker Carlson and the comments that he made about Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson.
All right, so we got a video. We have a video.
Okay, perfect.
Let's play the video so everybody can hear for themselves what this person said.
Yes.
In a year. But Joe Biden assured us she is, quote, one of our top legal minds. Watch.
We all know one of the most serious constitutional responsibility a president has is nominating someone to serve on the United States Supreme Court. As I did 4 days ago, I've nominated the Circuit Court of Appeals, Ketanji Brown Jackson, one of our nation's top legal minds.
So is Ketanji Brown Jackson, a name that even Joe Biden has trouble pronouncing, one of the top legal minds in the entire country? We certainly hope so. Biden's right. Appointing her is one of his gravest constitutional duties. So it might be time for Joe Biden to let us know what Ketanji Brown Jackson's LSAT score was. What the hell did she do in the LSAT? Why wouldn't he tell us that? That would settle the question conclusively as to whether she's a once-in-a-generation legal talent, the next learned hand. It would seem like Americans in a democracy have a right to know that and much more before giving her a lifetime appointment, but we didn't hear that.
Let me start out with this.
Go ahead, take it.
I forgot I had put that cross with the with the KKK hood on there, but that was real appropriate. Look, that was the most. That statement is the let me how to put it. The stupidity of that statement is only outmatched by the racism of that statement. Or let me say it the other way. The racism of that statement is only outmatched by the stupidity of that. That statement is more stupid than it is racist, and it's very racist. That is the dumbest thing I've ever heard somebody say about a Supreme Court pick, especially one like Judge Jackson. Now, to me, it's similar to this. To me, it's similar to asking, what are the ASVAB scores? ASVAB is the test people take to go into the military. It's like asking, what are the ASVAB scores of a three-star general who has been in the military 25 years and has risen from lieutenant all the way to three-star general, has impeccable education credentials, all that. And before you make him a four-star, before you make him or her a four-star general, you ask, what were their ASVAB scores? Something they took 30 years ago. It is like asking, what were the MCAT scores of a successful surgeon who graduated from Harvard undergrad, Harvard Medical School with honors, magna cum laude, has a successful practice, one of the best doctors in the country, and you ask, hey, before we appoint him or her to the board of the American Medical Association, what was tell us what was his or her MCAT scores, or what tell us what their SAT scores were. Chloe, it is dumb. It is stupid. It's an idiotic statement.
For
And,
our
and
listeners, Dad, who
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, for our listeners who don't know what the LSAT is, could you just explain it and as you give your thoughts?
Yeah, the LSAT. I don't know what the acronym stands for, Law School Admission Council or something, but it's the test you have to take in most states to apply to go to law school. And law schools look at your score to see what your score was. The score kind of tests your ability to analyze some facts and so forth. And it's a pretty tough test. Okay, it's a pretty tough test. Um, um, so yes, it's the law school admissions test, basically, like the MCAT is the medical school admission test.
Yeah, and it's a tough test, but it's an entrance test, it's an admissions test. I remember you have to like you look at diagrams. One section is you look at diagrams, and you got to be able to, if B was near C and D was near A and A was three seats behind F, where is X at? So one section is just like that. And then you have a section where it's a reading section, you answer some questions about it, you analyze it. And then there was another short reading section too. So it's a tough test, but it's not an indicator on how knowledgeable an attorney is, a licensed attorney is, the type of cases that attorney has handled, how good a litigator their attorney is. This is a test that before
That's
you
right.
even become an attorney, just to apply to go to law school in most
That's right.
states. So it has no effect on a licensed attorney's legal knowledge, and a judge's the way that the judge rules on cases, the way that they look at the law and the Constitution. Like it's and I've never had anyone ask me what my LSAT score was. I don't know any of my friends who have applied for jobs who their employer asked what the LSAT score is. I just had a friend who just got a new job at a defense firm, not once asked about the LSAT score. I mean, it has no bearing
None.
on how you practice law. Like
If
none.
anything, if you wanted to ask about a test score, you may want to at least ask about the bar.
Yeah.
Did you pass the bar the first time or something like that? But to go all the way back to LSAT score, that is just, again, the racism is outmatched by the stupidity, or the stupidity is outmatched by the racism. I mean, because the stupidity is birthed out of racism. We know that. I mean, I don't think they've ever asked such a question. Didn't ask that question of Sandra Day O'Connor. They didn't ask that question of Alina Kagan. They didn't ask that question of I don't think of Sotomayor, and none of the white all the U.S. Supreme Court justices since 1789, I believe. Most of them, nearly every one of them, have been white men, and most of them were not as qualified as Judge Jackson. This woman's qualifications are through the roof. Okay? That is not the issue. If they got an ideological issue with her, that's one thing. But her
Hmm.
qualifications and definitely what she did on an LSAT is just stupid.
It's a dog whistle. It's a racist dog whistle to Fox News listeners. They want to try to disqualify how immensely qualified she is. As a black female attorney, it's happened to me numerous times, going into court, going in front of judges, white judges, being stopped by bailiffs. It just happened to me yesterday when I was in a new court for the first time, and being stopped by a bailiff and basically like, where are you trying to go? I said, I'm an attorney and I'm here with my client to observe something. So it's unfortunately it's nothing new. Black female attorneys make up less than 2% of all. attorneys and lawyers in this country. This is still a white male dominated field, and they
And
and when we
black male attorneys also deal with this. Maybe not as much as females because of the intersectionality of racism and sexism, obviously. But I remember Brian Stevenson talking about how he had to strip in order to get into a prison to see one of his clients. And I've dealt with it so many times. You and I dealt with it together on one occasion over in Ellis County. You know, we were told we couldn't sit in the seats where the lawyers can sit. And as soon as the bailiff told us that, several white lawyers walked right behind us and sat in those exact seats, and the bailiff said nothing. And I called him out about it. So,
yeah.
you know, we as black attorneys, black professionals, doctors, even Barack Obama, the president of the United States of America, was called a liar during his State of the Union address. Okay. But yes, of course, the sectionality, the sexism and the racism would certainly make what black female professionals experience worse.
And I have no issue with Tucker Carlson. I was going to say Fox News, and then Fox
But
News or
same thing. I
Tucker.
mean, what's the difference?
Yeah, same thing. Fox News or anyone else looking at her rulings, what she has done on the bench, the opinions that she has handed down, because that's what they must do, because she would be sitting on the highest court in this land. And I don't feel like the process should be any different from any other Supreme Court nominee. So if you want to go through and prod her toughly and question her toughly on her legal opinions and her rulings from the bench, that's one thing. But to use this racist dog whistle to ask for her LSAT scores, something that has never been asked to my knowledge from another Supreme Court nominee, Brett Kavanaugh, Amy Coney Barrett, Justice Kagan, Sotomayor.
Well, Justice Kavanaugh was questioned about, you know, his incident, his alleged incident.
But was he questioned about his LSAT scores though?
No, no one, no one,
Yeah.
no
So
one.
this is the first.
Yeah,
So
no
I
one.
like I have no issue if you want to criticize her legal opinions, but bringing up the LSAT scores is just racist. We know why. It's never been done for another nominee before. So it's not surprising, but that's what they do over there.
Yeah, that's their modus operandi. I mean, they did it to
That's their
Obama.
motive.
They did it
Yeah.
to Obama for 6 years. Okay. All right,
Yep.
Chloe, we'll move on. Breonna Taylor. There was a trial this week by one of the police officers. Can you talk to us about that?
Yes. So a police officer who was involved in the shooting of Breonna Taylor was found not guilty this past.
Somebody's saying we can't hear you, Chloe. Hold on. I don't know what's going on here. Another photo here. Okay. Can you see the photo that's up now, Chloe?
I can see the photo.
Okay, so it's just a synopsis of what happened in the trial. If you want to read it, or people
Okay.
can read it on, go ahead.
Breonna Taylor and Kenneth Walker, her fiance, were in their apartment when cops from the LMPD attempted to serve a no-knock narcotics warrant. Thinking they were intruders, Mr. Walker fired a warning shot. LMPD claimed the shot struck Officer Mattingly, but the claim was never proven. In response to Mr. Walker's warning shot, Officers Mattingly, Cosgrove, and Hankinson discharged 32 rounds into the dark apartment without identifying a target and without an ability to see where their bullets would land. 5 of these rounds, fired by Sergeant Mattingly and Detective Cosgrove, and another projectile struck Miss Taylor, with one causing her death. Of the remaining 27 rounds, former Detective Hankinson fired 10. So out of those 3 police officers, Mattingly, Cosgrove, and Hankinson was the only officer that was charged in relation to um, those shots that killed Breonna Taylor. And he was charged with wanton endangerment because some of the bullets went into Breonna Taylor's neighbor's apartment. And so they had a jury trial on the case, and the jury, after only a few hours of deliberation, found him not guilty. So he was the only officer that was actually charged related to Breonna Taylor's killing, not for her killing, but for endangering her neighbors, and he was found not guilty.
Yeah, that's
Now,
that's that's an important point to make. He was not tried for participating in her killing, but that some of the bullets he shot at her went into a neighbor's apartment.
yeah, yep.
And I think
So,
it's noteworthy to point out that Daniel Cameron, who was the Attorney General of Kentucky, or may still be, was like special prosecutor who looked at whether these guys should have even been charged, and he ruled that they should not have been. And so he gave them cover from the jump street. And he is African American, by the way. He is African American. And one of the graphics that we just had up, that the audio was out, showed that he was a huge supporter and a friend of Donald Trump, and still is. So it's not surprising that Mr. Cameron, came out the way he came on these cases.
and our thoughts and prayers go out to Breonna Taylor's family and friends, and Mr. Walker. I'm sure that this was devastating news, even though he was not even charged for killing her. Just the fact that he was found not guilty for endangering even other people related to the shots that he fired to her. I'm sure it was tough news for her family to hear. There is still a pending federal investigation, so we'll have to see what the federal government does in terms of potentially bringing charges against these officers. These were only the state charges out of Kentucky, and he was found not guilty. So we'll keep you all updated on this story. We'll
Well,
see if there's any federal charges that come out of it as well.
yeah, and we also, related to this case, are the cases involving the murderers of Ahmaud Arbery. They were not police officers, but still sort of related. Those men were convicted in state court, and they were convicted in federal court. I don't think we've had the chance to talk about that since we didn't go live last week. But it was big that they were found guilty in federal court, because the issue in federal court was not whether or not they murdered Ahmaud Arbery, but whether the murder was racially motivated. And the government put forth lots and lots and lots of evidence to show that these men are racist. And most of the jury members were white, yet they were still found guilty of a hate crime, of being racially motivated. In other words, they murdered this kid because they are racist, because of racial hatred. That we cannot overlook. That is very, very, very important. Very important. And we're going to talk in a few moments about the anti-lynching bill here in just a few minutes. But that is critical that we put on the record. Not only are they murderers, but they are racist, hateful murderers. And I read several days ago that the jury foreman in the state case, I believe, state or federal, came out and said he had never seen such evil sitting on a jury. Those men had no remorse, none whatsoever. It's almost sad and what's the word? It's pitiful that somebody's heart can be that full of hatred towards someone because of the color of their skin. Anyone who has that kind of racial hatred in their heart is more in bondage than the person they hate. I would not. That's exhausting. Who would want to go around living like that? I mean, it's just sad. It's just pitiful, pathetic that these men had such racial hate in their hearts. And unfortunately, there are many, many, many more. Collectively, our country is suffering from the same condition. Collectively. That doesn't mean everybody. That doesn't mean all whites. That's not true. I'm not saying that. But collectively, white society, unfortunately, just based on the historical record and based on the disparities of today, all these things, unfortunately, white society suffers in many ways from the same condition that those three men. Those three men are mere microcosms of the larger white community. And it's really sad. It's not true with all whites at all. I know many whites who are not racist, but as a whole.
Yeah. And it's just something that, people like us and our listeners and people around this country, we have to continue to fight every day against this racism, the prejudice, this unjust system, which is why one of the things that our tagline is we defy an unjust legal system. And that's why we make these videos, because we want to get this information out and really empower and equip people to defy it. So if, your loved one is facing a similar situation, or, you have some type of incident with law enforcement, you'll be better equipped to have the knowledge you need to defy that system.
Well,
So
your mom brought out a very good point, and that is, she said that one of the convicted men in the Arbery case was a DA investigator, and also one of the people who tried to cover this up was the DA herself.
Yeah.
Right. So this was not just these evil racist men, but it was an evil racist system that tried to cover this young man's murder up. That does something to me. That does something in my gut. It's not enough that they murdered him. It's not enough that they were racist and motivated by racial hate, but the system, the legal system, the criminal injustice system tried to cover it up. It was months before they brought charges against these people, just like in the Trayvon Martin case.